So if you want to get started with some ranunculus, then stay tuned and I'll show you all of the steps I take to get my ranunculus perfect flowers for a cutting garden. They're ready in spring when little else is. They are relatively easy to grow once you get them going, so they're a bit tricky to get started, but they're good once you've sprouted them, and you can get a lot of flowers from one plant, so they're really productive and useful to have to add to any spring bouquet that you might want to have. Now, they will flower earlier if they've got a bit of protection, because giving them the warmth they need to grow will make them flower sooner. But ranunculus are a very classic cutting garden flower for spring. The flower structure is a bit like a peony, a bit like a rose. In fact, they're often termed the spring rose. But they look lovely mixed in with tulips and daffodils and other spring flowers. So they are perfect to get your cutting garden season started. So ranunculus, although they're a spring plant, you start them the season before in autumn. So ideally you're looking at October, November time. You can go through as late as December. I certainly did this year. Pre-sprout them so that they get going. You're pre-sprouting them in warmth and darkness, but then once they're sprouted, they can come out into the light, and you can pot them up into their own pots until they're ready to go out. And ready to go out means that they will have a bit of protection. Now, they can stand some frost. It just depends on how much frost you have. So I would err on the side of giving them protection in a small polytunnel type thing, or covering them with fleece, or keep them within undercover until you're sure that the risk of frost is gone. You can sow them a bit later, so you can sprout them later on, ready so that they are ready to be planted out later in spring once the spring frost is gone, but you have a much later flower. So if you want to get your cutting garden up and running quickly, then you need to be planning the season before to get these flowers going. And ranunculus are handy in that, unlike most daffodils or tulips where they're only a single flower and then they're done, ranunculus can have 6 or 7 flowers per plant to cut from, and if you cut them, they will then continuously reflower until they're fully spent, but they will continually reflower. So they're a perfect plant for a productive cutting garden in spring. They're a bit tricky to grow. They're temperamental in what they want, but once you get the hang of it, they're fairly straightforward, and you'll be rewarded tenfold by having them. Ranunculus are very strange creatures. They look a bit alien-like, so if I can... Essentially, it's like a claw-like structure with lots of, or even an octopusy type structure with lots of bits and bobs. This is going to form the roots, so these sections are going to form the roots, and then it'll sprout from the top. So these are dry at the moment, so when you buy them they will come in dry. They need to be rehydrated before you use them, and they need to maintain that moisture as they're growing. So what I'm going to do is take these and place them in a bowl of water for a few hours, and we'll look at the difference once that's done. So we'll leave them in the water for a few hours, possibly changing that water every hour or so, depending on how clean it looks, so that they don't stagnate. But let's just keep them there. I might put them in the sunshine and keep them there for 3 hours at least, so that they can rehydrate before I put them on. So our Ranunculus corms have been rehydrating for 3 hours now, and really you only need 2 or 3 hours to rehydrate them. It's more important to have them hydrated but not overhydrated, because that can then lead to a tendency for them to rot. So you don't want to go through all this trouble and then it rots. So the hydrated corm looks like this. So it's a little bit more chunkier than it was. The legs are fatter and plump. They feel and look much more hydrated. So this will give them the oomph to get growing. When they're dehydrated, it's really just for storage, and it's a great way to store them, but they will not grow when they're dehydrated. So this is what gives them the oomph to grow. So it's all very well hydrating them to start with, but what you then need to do is make sure that you keep those hydration levels correct for when they're growing. So to pre-sprout them, which is what we're doing, we're pre-sprouting them before planting them out, so we can get to see, you can control the conditions better, and we can get to see which ones are going to grow and which ones aren't. So to do that, you need to have the right compost mix. Now that compost mix needs to be something light and aerated, so no big lumps in it that will stop the roots from taking hold. And I've found by adding quite a lot of perlite or vermiculite helps retain that hydration within the mix, so that it doesn't afford it to be too damp, but damp enough so that they will continue to grow. So one of the key things is to make sure that the hydration, as I say, is correct. So let me show you what I would do now with the compost mix. This is my mix. At the moment there's no water in it, but as you can see there is lots of perlite in this particular mix, but there's no lumps. It's nice and easy and sieved to make sure that the lumps are to make sure that the soil is lump free. So what we now need to do is fill a tray. So I sow them, for want of a better word, plant them I guess. So I plant them into a tray. They don't need to be separated out at this point. This is just pre-sprouting them to get them going. You can then plant them into individual pots afterwards. So you can plant them into individual pots afterwards, so that that will then, once they get bigger. But at the moment we're just really trying to get them going. So I have two varieties here. I have this variety, which is Purple Heart, and this hopefully it will be a lovely deep colour that will add depth to a bouquet. Now as you can see, I'm putting them quite close together because they don't need much at this point. I'm just placing them at the moment so that I can make sure I've got enough space. Now this second batch are a white Ranunculus. So there we go, we've got enough space there. Let's just spread it out. So now that we're positioned, we've got enough space for everything. I can give that a little bit more room. then we can just dig in the hole and plant them. So what you're looking for is the legs to be going down into the soil, and this, if there is a stalk, that's the bit where the sprouting will occur, so it'll come out of there. So this needs to be the top, the legs go in the bottom. They don't need to be too deep. It's just about giving them something, some nutrition and some water to get them going. And planting them quite shallowly like this really allows you to see when they are sprouting. So you're not waiting in anticipation for the sprouts to emerge out of the soil. You'll see them on the corms as they sprout. So a bit like dahlia tubers if you're wanting to take cuttings from a dahlia tuber. It's a big lump. That didn't go through the sip. Right, so that's them. We now need to water them to make sure that the soil is hydrated. So I am just going to use, this was fresh, I changed the water quite frequently in the space of those 2 hours, so I'm just going to reuse this just to make sure. Some hydration, and I'm going to leave it to drain for a little bit. I'll leave it to drain for a little bit before doing anything more with it. So as I said earlier, one of the key ingredients to make sure that ranunculus will grow is water and hydration. The other key ingredient is to make sure you've got some soil mix, a good soil mix, a good light soil mix to make sure that it will grow. And the final thing that they need to sprout is darkness. Warmth and darkness go hand in hand. So they're not something that needs light. They respond better to darkness. So within a couple of weeks, then they will be sprouting once, if I give them the right environment. So I'll be taking these inside with me, and I will be placing them probably in the understairs cupboard because it's nice and cozy in there. It's quite warm and it's definitely dark. So that's where I'll be placing them. I'll keep checking up on them over, every few days to make sure that they're still hydrated. But I will come back in a couple of weeks and show you what they look like. So it's 9 days after I first put the ranunculus in the cupboard to sprout. So let me show you the results. So at this end of the tray, these I think were old corms that I found in the barn that I'd bought last year and did nothing. So I thought I'd try and rehydrate them and see what happened. Well, again, nothing at the moment, but they do appear to have a bit of mould growing around them. There, we've got a bit of mould growing. That corm in the corner doesn't look great. So this half of the tray isn't looking promising, but as I scan across to the other end, then we have some success. So these were fresh corms this year. So as you can see, we have a few corms with growth. So we've got a bit of sprouting happening. They are looking a bit insipid colour, but that's because they've been in the dark. So now I've brought them out into the light, we should get some more green growth. And if I span across, these are the corms that I planted a good few months ago now, actually, but they are ready to plant outside. I am just waiting for the nights to get a bit warmer and avoid the risk of frost. But they should be good to go. So they're the stages that we can expect to see with your ranunculus to get them sprouting. So if you've been inspired, then go out and get some ranunculus and try them. It's currently end of March here in the UK. So these were sprouted mid-March, and they should be ready to go out in a few weeks' time, which is perfect for avoiding the frost. However, they will take a long time to mature and get into flower. So if you want them flowers earlier, then grow them or plant them out certainly earlier in the season. Get them into good, strong, healthy plants, and you'll have flowers come May to use in your spring floral arrangements. Stay tuned for other videos that might help grow your cotton patch.